Hi, everybody. Okay, so let's carry on with our miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. And you can see now how miraculous it's becoming. Keeps going and going, different journeys, different people, and different reasons to be with them. Edward is learning something here as he goes on his journey. And I can tell by your responses in your journal or either in my blueprint where you're putting the answers in. That's great. That I can see that you're thinking about the journey he is on. So we last left Edward, or also known as Jangles at this moment. Little Sarah Ruth named him Jangles, and Bryce, the older brother, has left with Jangles, and they walk down the road to a new town. And they're there now, and they're trying to make some money because they need something to eat. So I always start again when I read, when we pick up and go. It's from the last couple of sentences, okay, from the previous chapter. And that would have been chapter 20 that we ended on. So the last of that was, he let Edward fall to the pavement. I ain't gonna cry no more. And Bryce wiped his nose and his eyes with the back of his hand, and he picked up the button box and looked inside it. We got us enough money to get something to eat, he said. Come on, Jangles. And that's where we left them. Off they were going to have something to eat. Well, let's see what the next adventure for Edward or Jangles looks like. Okay, here we go. Chapter 21. You can start that in your sequence storyboard, chapter 21. And it says Neil's Diner. Note the apostrophe. So the diner belongs to Neil. That's right. So Neil's Diner. Diner is an old-fashioned word for restaurant, or sometimes in the United States they say more of diner as like a cafe to us. So a diner is just a small place to have a meal. Well, let's find out what happens. Okay. So chapter 21. The diner was called Neil's. The word was written in big red neon letters that flashed on and off. Inside it was warm and bright and smelled like fried chicken and toast and coffee. Bryce sat at the counter and put Edward on a stool next to him. He leaned the rabbit's forehead up against the counter so that he would not fall. What are you gonna have, sugar? The waitress said to Bryce. Give me some pancakes, said Bryce, and some eggs. And I want a steak too. I want a big old steak and some toast and some coffee. The waitress leaned forward and pulled at one of Edward's ears and then pushed him backwards so that she could see his face. This your rabbit? She said to Bryce. Yes'm, he's mine now. He belonged to my sister. Bryce wiped at his nose with the back of his hand. We're in show business, me and him. Is that right? Said the waitress. She had a name tag on the front of her dress. Marlene, it said. She looked at Edward's face, and then she let go of his ear, and he fell forward so that his head rested against the counter again. Go ahead, Marlene, thought Edward. Push me around. Do with me as you will. What does it matter? I am broken. Broken, I say. The food came, and Bryce ate all of it without even looking up from his plate. Well, you was hungry for sure, said Marlene as she cleared away the plates. I reckon show business is hard work. Yes'm, said Bryce. Marlene tucked the check into the coffee cup. Bryce picked it up and looked at it and then shook his head. I ain't got enough, he said to Edward. Ma'am, he said to Marlene when she came back and filled up his coffee cup. I ain't got enough. What, sugar? I ain't got enough money. She stopped pouring the coffee and looked at him. You're going to have to talk to Neil about that. Neil, it turned out, was both the owner and the cook. He was large, red-haired, and red-faced man who came out of the kitchen holding a spatula in one hand. You came in here hungry, right? He said to Bryce. Yes, sir, said Bryce, and he wiped his nose with the back of his hand. And you ordered some food, and I cooked it, and Marlene brought it to you, right? I reckon, said Bryce. You reckon, said Neil, and he brought the spatula down on the countertop with a thwack. Bryce jumped. Yes, sir. No, sir. I cooked it for you, said Neil. Yes, sir, said Bryce, and he picked Edward up off the stool and held him close. Everyone in the diner had stopped eating. They were all staring at the boy and the rabbit and Neil. Only Marlene looked away. You ordered it. I cooked it. Marlene served it. You ate it. Now, said Neil, I want my money. And he tapped the spatula lightly on the counter. Bryce cleared his throat. You ever seen a rabbit dance? He said. How's that? Said Neil. You ever before in your life seen a rabbit dance? Bryce set Edward on the floor and started pulling the strings attached to his feet, making him do a slow dance. He put his harmonica in his mouth and played a sad song that went along with the dance. Somebody laughed. Bryce took the harmonica out of his mouth and said, he could dance some more if you want him to. He could dance to pay for what I ate. Neil stared at Bryce, and then without warning, he reached down and grabbed hold of Edward. This is what I think of dancing rabbits, said Neil. And he swung Edward by the feet, swung him so hard that his head hit the edge of the counter. There was a large crack. Bryce screamed, and the world, Edward's world, went black. Oh dear, what do you think happened to Edward there? Remember, he's a China rabbit doll. His head hit the counter, and it went crack. So that sounds, those describing words, those adjectives are telling me that something has happened to Edward's China head. Okay, think about what's maybe happening there. And his world went black, so he couldn't see right now. There was nothing about Edward that was normal anymore. Well, let's see where that takes us. Chapter 22. Take a really good look. Now stay with me. Take a good look, because you know how the chapters all have pictures at the front that tell about the chapter? Well, here's the next chapter, and here is the picture of chapter 22. I'm going to hold it there for a minute. What do you notice? Yep. Does that look familiar? Well, I'll remind you of the front of the book because you're not here with me, but I'll show you. There's the front of the book. There it is. And here is the picture for chapter 22. That's the cover picture. That must be a very important chapter. Let's find out what happens to Edward here. It was dusk, and Edward was walking down a sidewalk. He was walking on his own, putting one foot in front of the other without any assistance from anybody, and he was wearing a fine suit made of red silk. Well, we know Edward can't walk on his own. He's always complained about how he would like to. Well, here he is walking on his own, and he's wearing that red fine silk suit. He walked down the sidewalk, and then he turned onto a path that led up to a house with lighted windows. I know this house, thought Edward. This is Abeline's house. I'm on Egypt Street. Lucy came running out of the front door of the house, barking and jumping and wagging her tail. Down, girl, said a deep, gruff voice, and Edward looked up, and there was Bull standing at the door. Well, remember, Lucy the dog belonged to Bull, and here he was at Abeline's house. Hello, Malone, said Bull. Hello, good old rabbit pie. We've been waiting for you. And Bull swung the door wide, and Edward walked inside. Abeline was there, and Nellie, and Lawrence, and Bryce. Susanna, called Nellie. Jangles, said Bryce. Edward, said Abeline, and she held out her arms to him. But Edward stood still. He looked around the room. You're searching for Sarah Ruth? Bryce asked. Edward nodded. You got to go outside if you want to see Sarah Ruth, said Bryce. So they all went outside, Lucy and Bull, and Nellie and Lawrence, and Bryce and Abilene, and Edward. "Right there," said Bryce, and he pointed up to the stars. "Yep," said Lawrence, "that is the Sarah Ruth constellation." And he picked Edward up and put him on his shoulder. "You can see it, right there." Edward felt a pang of sorrow, deep and sweet and familiar. Why did she have to be so far away? If only I had wings, he thought, I could fly to her. Out of the corner of his eye, the rabbit saw something flutter. Edward looked over his shoulder then, and there they were, the most magnificent wings he had ever seen. Orange and red and blue and yellow. And they were on his back. They belonged to him. They were his wings. What a wonderful night this was. He was walking on his own. He had an elegant new suit. And now he had wings. He could fly anywhere, do anything. Why had he never realized it before? His heart soared inside of him. He spread his wings and flew off Lawrence's shoulders, out of his hands, and up into the nighttime sky toward the stars, toward Sarah Ruth. "No!" shouted Abilene. "Catch him!" said Bryce. Edward flew higher. Lucy barked. "Malone!" shouted Bull. And with a terrific lunge, Bull grabbed hold of Edward's feet and pulled him out of the sky and wrestled him down to the earth. "You can't go yet," said Bull. "Stay with us," said Abilene. Edward beat his wings, but it was no use. Bull held him firmly to the ground. "Stay with us," repeated Abilene. Edward started to cry. "I couldn't stand to lose you again," said Nellie. "Neither could I," said Abilene. "It would break my heart." Lucy bent her face toward Edward's, and she licked his tears away. That's the end of chapter 22. What do you think happened in there? Because we know Edward's a China rabbit doll. He can't walk on his own. He certainly can't cry. He certainly didn't have wings, but in this chapter, all the characters he's been with, all the people he's met on his journey were in his house that he started from. So I wonder, what do you think was happening there? Remember, his world went dark before this chapter. So we can maybe make a connection or a prediction going forward. When it's dark and you're sleeping, sometimes we might have a dream. Do you think this might have been a dream for Edward? It's a possibility. Let's see what happens next in chapter 23. Okay, here we go, chapter 23. Here's the picture. There's our Edward laying on a table, and looks like this nice man is working on him. Well, let's find out what happens. "Exceedingly well made," said the man who was running a warm cloth over Edward's face. "A work of art, I would say. A surpassingly, unbelievably dirty work of art, but art nonetheless. And art can be dealt with, just as your broken head has been dealt with." Edward looked into the eyes of the man. "Ah, there you are," the man said. "I can see that you're listening now. Your head was broken. I fixed it. I brought you back from the world of the dead." So do we think something happened like that to Edward? Remember, he's just a doll, so it's a fiction story. But for Edward, not having his China head together certainly meant he might not have been able to think for a little while. "My heart," thought Edward, "my heart is broken." No need to thank me," the man said. "It's my job, quite literally. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Lucius Clark Dollmender." Okay, let's stop there. Lucius Clark. I'll spell it for you. Ready? Capital L-U-C-I-U-S. His last name is Clark. Capital C-L-A-R-K-E. Lucius Clark, doll mender. That means he fixes broken dolls. So allow me to introduce myself and your head. May I tell you? Will it upset you? Well, I always say the truth must be met head on. No pun intended. Your head, young sir, was in 21 pieces. 21 pieces? Said Edward. And he repeated it, 21 pieces. Lucius Clark nodded. 21, he said. All modesty aside, I must admit that a lesser doll mender, a doll mender without my skills, might not have been able to rescue you. But let's not speak of what might have been. Let us speak instead of what is. You are whole. You have been pulled back from the brink of oblivion by your humble servant, Lucius Clark. And here, Lucius Clark put his hand on his chest and bowed deeply over Edward. This was quite a speech to wake up to, and Edward lay on his back, trying to absorb it. He was on a wooden table. He was in a room with sunshine pouring in from high windows. His head, apparently, had been in 21 pieces, and now was put back together into one. He was not wearing a red suit. In fact, again, he had no clothes on at all. He was naked again, and he did not have wings. And then he remembered Bryce, the diner, Neil swinging him through the air. Bryce! You were wondering perhaps about your young friend, said Lucius, the one with the continually running nose? Yes, he brought you here weeping and begging for my assistance. Put 'em together again, he said. Put 'em back together. I told him, I said, young sir, I am a businessman. I can put your rabbit back together again. For a price. The question is, can you pay this price? He could not. Of course he could not. He said that he could not. I told him then that he had two options. Only two. The first option being that he seek assistance elsewhere. Option 2 was that I would fix you to the very best of my considerable abilities, and then you would become mine. His no longer, but mine. Here Lucius fell silent. He nodded, agreeing with himself. 2 options only, he said. And your friend chose option 2. He gave you up so that you could be healed. Extraordinary, really. Bryce, thought Edward. Lucius Clark clapped his hands together. But no worries, my friend, no worries. I fully intend to keep up my end of the bargain. I will restore you to what I perceive to be your former glory. You shall have rabbit fur ears and a rabbit fur tail. Your whiskers shall be repaired and replaced. Your eyes repainted to a bright, stunning blue, and you will be clothed in the finest of suits. And then someday I will reap the return on my investment in you. All in good time. All in good time. In the doll business, we have a saying, there is real time and there is doll time. You, my friend, have entered doll time. That's the end of that chapter. And that's the end of our reading for today. Now, wow, he's gone from being at the diner, in Neil's diner, and Bryce ate a whole bunch of food he couldn't pay for, but he was one hungry boy. Unfortunately, Edward was tossed again, and his head hit the counter. And then his world went dark, and something very important happened in the chapter where he walked up to his old house. Think about those things. Think about all the characters again. Now he's met another character, Lucius Clark, the doll mender. And Bryce couldn't pay to have him fixed. But if the doll mender kept him, then he would, then I guess that's how Bryce saved Edward. Because Bryce had to leave him there so that Edward could be fixed. And he was thinking of Edward. He wanted Edward to be fixed rather than Bryce thinking of himself, thinking, I want to keep Edward. But he knew what was best for Edward. because Edward gave so much joy to Sarah Ruth, and so Bryce repaid him. Right? Well, there you go. So I will send the questions forward coming up. I hope you enjoyed our reading today, and we'll see you next time, boys and girls. Bye.